the South China Sea, a flashpoint brimming with tension. For years, Chinese patrol ships have clashed with Filipino fishermen, military vessels have shadowed one another, and disputed reefs have become symbols of national pride. But imagine this: diplomacy collapses. A standoff spirals out of control. Shots are fired. Suddenly, the Philippines and China are at war. Shipping lanes grind to a halt. Washington and Beijing face off. And the world watches as a regional clash threatens to ignite something far greater. Before we continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want deeper geopolitical analysis beyond the headlines. This video is for educational and analytical purposes only. It does not promote violence or conflict. Our goal is to explore possible scenarios so you can better understand global geopolitics. Now, let's begin. The South China Sea is not a distant abstract problem. It is a living, daily pressure cooker of maritime patrols, legal claims, and economic stakes. China's expansive nine-dash posture and island building have converted reefs into militarized outposts, while Filipino fishermen and patrols regularly encounter larger, better-equipped Chinese vessels. Satellite imagery, defense analyses, and region reporting all confirm that Beijing's installations now carry runways, radar, and defensive systems, converting reefs into forward operating bases. Tensions have been rising in specific, dangerous ways. In 2025 alone, there have been multiple confrontations at Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal. China's Coast Guard has fired powerful water cannon at Philippine ships and staged highly symbolic flag-raising ceremonies near disputed features, moves Manila views as pretexts for further control. Philippine resupply missions to the grounded BRP Sierra Madre at Second Thomas Shoal have been shadowed and sometimes blocked by Chinese vessels. Those incidents have repeatedly tested Manila's political patience and operational limits. History matters. Manila's legal victory at The Hague in 2016 affirmed Philippine maritime rights, but Beijing rejected the ruling and has continued to press its claims through presence and coercion, a pattern that raises the chance a tactical confrontation becomes strategic. The Philippines still relies on the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States as its ultimate security backstop. But that treaty is political as much as legal. Invoking it triggers a complex U.S. decision calculus about risk, credibility, and escalation. Now imagine the flashpoint. A Philippine patrol escorting fishing boats near Scarborough Shoal is boxed in by an unusually aggressive Chinese flotilla. Radio warnings escalate, small boat maneuvering becomes reckless. In the close quarters of those encounters, collisions become likely, and a single misfired round or engine cut can produce casualties. Within minutes, video from phones and drones spreads across social media, inflaming domestic politics in Manila and generating immediate diplomatic outrage in Beijing. That moment, the lethal exchange, the viral footage, the mass political outcry, is the spark. It turns a pattern of coercive presence into an open contest. Once shells fly or lives are lost, the legal arguments and the Hague ruling matter far less than the realpolitik of naval posture, alliance obligations, and the difficult U.S. decision about how far it will go to defend an ally at sea. Section 2. Military balance. On paper, the military gap between China and the Philippines is stark. China's People's Liberation Army Navy, PLA-N, is the world's largest, boasting hundreds of ships, including aircraft carriers, nuclear and diesel submarines, modern destroyers, and amphibious assault vessels capable of projecting power across the South China Sea. Beijing has invested heavily in anti-access divided by area denial, A2 divided by AD systems, with long-range surface-to-air missiles, coastal batteries, and advanced radar networks designed to deter outside intervention. Satellite imagery and defense analyses confirm that China's artificial islands are not just symbolic, they are fortified bases, capable of launching aircraft, monitoring vast swaths of ocean, and threatening any intruding forces. The Philippines, by contrast, maintains a small and relatively limited naval force. Its fleet includes a handful of modern frigates, coastal patrol craft, and older vessels from previous decades. Its air force has modest maritime strike capabilities, mostly light attack planes and helicopters, leaving Manila vulnerable in open water engagements. Without external support, the Philippines cannot hope to control contested reefs or challenge Chinese dominance at sea. Yet Manila's strength lies in its alliances. Under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDK, the United States has rotational forces and prepositioned equipment on Philippine soil. These include fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, and naval strike capabilities that could rapidly respond to Chinese aggression. U.S. Carriers and submarines operating in the Philippine Sea serve as a critical deterrent, signaling that any Chinese attack risks direct confrontation with a global superpower. China's likely strategy is straightforward: strike early and decisively. The plan would aim to seize contested features, enforce blockades, and create a fait accompli before U.S. forces can intervene. The Philippines, in response, would adopt asymmetric tactics, coastal missile batteries, fast attack craft, and guerrilla-style naval maneuvers designed to harass and delay larger Chinese vessels, imposing costs while relying on Allied support. The balance is thus not just about firepower, it is a contest of geography, alliances, and strategic patience. China has the conventional advantage, but Manila's ability to leverage terrain, asymmetric tactics, and treaty commitments could turn a mismatch into a prolonged and costly stalemate. The real question is not who has the bigger fleet, but who can manage escalation, alliances, and the first moves that will define the course of the conflict. Section 3. U.S. Involvement. The moment the Philippines calls on the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, Washington faces a stark choice: intervene or risk losing credibility across the Indo-Pacific. The treaty obliges the United States to consider attacks on Philippine forces as a potential threat to its own security commitments, but it does not automatically guarantee war. Each decision carries enormous strategic weight not just for Manila, but for every U.S. ally watching closely. If the U.S. intervenes, it brings formidable firepower to the table. Carrier strike groups, equipped with F-35 seconds and advanced electronic warfare systems, can dominate the airspace over the Philippine Sea. Submarines, both nuclear and diesel-electric, silently patrol choke points like the Luzon Strait, capable of striking high-value Chinese naval assets. Forward-deployed bases in Okinawa, Guam, and the Philippines provide logistical hubs for rapid resupply, refueling, and intelligence operations. Surveillance aircraft monitor Chinese movements around contested reefs in near real time, feeding commanders actionable intelligence for precise strikes. Yet the U.S. calculus is not purely military. Intervention risks direct conflict with Beijing, escalating a regional dispute into a confrontation between the world's two largest economies and military powers. A downed fighter, a sunken warship, or an accidental misfire could rapidly spiral beyond Manila's waters. Washington must weigh credibility against risk, standing firm signals to allies like Japan and Australia that the U.S. will uphold its commitments, while hesitation might embolden China and undermine decades of regional security architecture. At the same time, U.S. involvement changes the dynamics for China. Beijing would likely interpret intervention as a signal to escalate, potentially threatening Taiwan or targeting U.S. assets elsewhere in the region. Cyber operations, anti-satellite strikes, or missile attacks against U.S. bases in Guam could be part of a broader coercion strategy, a demonstration that the cost of intervention is high. For Manila, U.S. involvement is both lifeline and gamble. It can deter outright occupation of disputed reefs, extend the Philippines' defensive reach, and buy time for asymmetric strategies to take effect. But it also places the Philippines at the center of a global flashpoint, where the first misstep could ignite a broader regional conflict. In this high-stakes environment, every move from deploying a carrier strike group to signaling defensive missile coverage sends a message not just to Beijing, but to Tokyo, Canberra, Hanoi, and all of Southeast Asia. The U.S. is watching, and its decision will define the balance of power in the South China Sea for years to come. Section 4. Regional repercussions. A conflict between the Philippines and China would never remain bilateral. Across Asia, every government, military planner, and trade official would feel the shockwaves almost immediately. Japan, deeply invested in maritime security, would watch Beijing's moves with alarm. Tokyo has increasingly coordinated with U.S. forces under joint exercises and intelligence sharing agreements. In a Philippine-China clash, Japan could invoke aspects of its self-defense laws to provide logistical or indirect support, potentially deploying its own naval assets to safeguard sea lanes critical to its economy. Vietnam, another claimant in the South China Sea, would see an opportunity to assert its own territorial rights. Hanoi has long resisted Chinese encroachment, and a distracted Beijing could allow Vietnam to reinforce positions around the Spratly Islands or conduct naval patrols with reduced risk of immediate retaliation. Meanwhile, ASEAN faces a fracturing dilemma. Some member states, such as Cambodia and Laos, have leaned toward Beijing, quietly supporting China's strategic posture. Others, like Singapore and Indonesia, may side with the US, at least diplomatically, to maintain regional stability. The bloc's internal divisions would intensify, undermining decades of cooperative frameworks and trade agreements. Beyond politics, the global economy would take an immediate hit. The South China Sea channels more than $3.5 trillion in goods annually, including a significant portion of global oil shipments. Even limited naval skirmishes would disrupt shipping routes, spike fuel prices, and trigger cascading supply chain delays worldwide. Energy markets would reel, commodities would soar, and regional ports could see unprecedented congestion. The conflict would also reshape military postures across Asia. Nations would accelerate arms procurement, fortify islands, and invest in anti-access divided by area denial systems. US. Allies from Australia to South Korea would reassess their own engagement strategies, preparing for contingencies far beyond the immediate theater. In short, a Philippine-China clash is not just a localized crisis, it is a regional earthquake. Every maneuver, blockade, or missile test sends signals across capitals from Tokyo to Jakarta. The South China Sea is the economic artery of Asia, and a war there threatens to choke the lifeblood of global trade, destabilize alliances, and redraw the map of power in the Indo-Pacific. Section 5: Escalation Risks. Once fighting begins, the danger is not just immediate destruction at sea, it is how quickly a localized clash can spiral into a regional or even global confrontation. China has the capability to wage more than conventional naval warfare. Cyber attacks could cripple Philippine infrastructure, targeting power grids, telecommunications, and critical ports. These strikes could paralyze cities like Manila within hours, disrupting civilian life and complicating military coordination. In parallel, Beijing could use economic coercion, threatening trade embargoes or sanctioning Philippine imports to amplify pressure without direct combat. The United States faces its own risks. Direct involvement brings the specter of superpower confrontation. A U.S. fighter jet shot down over contested waters, a submarine damaged in the Luzon Strait, or a misfired missile could trigger an escalation beyond Philippine territorial waters. Each move from carrier deployments to missile strikes must balance deterrence with restraint, knowing that a single miscalculation could ignite a far larger conflict. Secondary theaters compound the danger. Beijing could threaten Taiwan, testing U.S. commitment and forcing Washington to divide its focus across multiple fronts. Any conflict involving Taiwan would draw in Japan, Australia, and potentially other regional powers, turning the South China Sea skirmish into a full-fledged Indo-Pacific war. Even non-military escalation is possible. Propaganda, social media campaigns, and information warfare could inflame nationalist sentiment in China, the Philippines, and across the region. Public opinion might pressure governments into more aggressive stances, leaving less room for diplomacy or de-escalation. History offers grim lessons. Small miscalculations in the past, the 1914 Sarajevo crisis or the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, show how quickly a localized tension can mushroom into global conflict. In the South China Sea, the stakes are magnified by the sheer concentration of global trade, nuclear powers in proximity, and overlapping alliances. The ultimate risk is that what begins as a territorial dispute over reefs and shoals could evolve into a clash of superpowers. Cyber, economic, and conventional warfare could interlock, creating a scenario where no side can disengage without losing face, power, or credibility. In such an environment, the line between a regional war and a global conflict becomes dangerously thin. Section 6: Endgame Scenarios. Once the initial clashes settle, the trajectory of the conflict depends on decisions made in the opening days. The South China Sea becomes not just a battleground of ships and missiles, but a chessboard of strategy, alliances, and global perception. 1. China wins fast. In this scenario, Beijing overwhelms Philippine defenses with superior numbers and firepower. Chinese warships secure disputed reefs, establish blockades, and present the world with a fait accompli. The Philippines, unable to resist alone, becomes largely dependent on diplomatic channels and U.S. pressure. If Washington hesitates, China solidifies its control of the South China Sea, sending a clear message to the region. Its maritime dominance is unchallenged. Such a rapid victory would embolden Beijing and other flashpoints, including Taiwan and the East China Sea. 2. Stalemate with U.S. involvement. American intervention changes the calculus. Carrier strike groups, submarines, and surveillance networks allow U.S. forces to halt Chinese advances. Skirmishes continue, but neither side gains decisive ground. This scenario produces a tense, militarized stalemate. Reefs and islands remain contested. Trade lanes are under constant surveillance, and regional militaries accelerate preparations for the next confrontation. For Manila, this outcome preserves sovereignty, but at the cost of permanent militarization and reliance on allies for security. 3. Regional war. The riskiest scenario sees the conflict spill beyond the Philippines. U.S. allies, including Japan and Australia, engage directly. China, feeling cornered, may open secondary fronts targeting Taiwan, attacking U.S. bases in Guam, or executing cyber strikes across Asia. Southeast Asia becomes a broader theater of war. Global trade collapses, oil prices soar, and economies around the world teeter. In this outcome, the South China Sea is no longer a regional flashpoint. It becomes the ignition point for a global crisis, testing alliances, nuclear deterrence, and the world's ability to contain escalation. Each endgame scenario carries profound consequences: shifts in regional balance of power, fractured global trade networks, and long-term uncertainty over U.S. credibility in Asia. The first moves the decision to escalate, the timing of intervention, and the management of alliances will define which path unfolds. Ultimately, a Philippine-China conflict is not just about territorial control. It is a test of strategy, diplomacy, and restraint, where every action echoes far beyond the waters of the South China Sea. A war between the Philippines and China would never remain just between them. It would test alliances, strain economies, and push the world to the brink of great power war. The South China Sea isn't just about reefs or fishermen, it's about the future of global order. So here's the question. If conflict erupted tomorrow, would the U.S. and its allies stand firm, or would Beijing reshape the balance of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into flashpoints like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our every geopolitical analysis. This is GeoPower Report. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.